They found Duke Sebastian Ravenshire standing alone in the blue drawing room at 3 in the morning, staring at a portrait of his grandfather with something close to hatred in his eyes. His phone had been vibrating for an hour, 17 missed calls from the family solicitor, 9 from his mother, 3 from Buckingham itself. Outside, beyond the estate's iron gates, photographers waited in the December cold like vultures circling something already dead. Tomorrow morning, the engagement would be announced. Tomorrow morning, Sebastian would smile for the cameras and take the hand of Lady Victoria Ashford, a woman whose favorite color he didn't know, whose laughter he'd never heard, whose presence in his life felt like slow suffocation dressed in Chanel. The champagne glass in his hand trembled. Not from cold, from rage. And if you stay with me through what happens next, you'll understand why some men would rather burn their entire world down than spend one more day pretending to be alive. The morning of December 10th began. The way every morning began in the Ravenshire household, with precision, expectation, and absolutely no room for deviation. Sebastian woke at 6 to find his schedule already laid out on cream-colored cardstock beside his coffee. Breakfast with the Minister of Culture at 8. Ribbon cutting for the new Children's Hospital wing at 10. Lunch with the board of the Ravenshire Foundation at noon. Afternoon meetings with estate managers, then a formal dinner at the Carlton Club where his mother would parade him past eligible women like a prize stallion at auction. He stood in the shower until the water ran cold, trying to remember when he'd stopped feeling anything at all. His valet, Richards, appeared at 7:15 with 3 suit options, each more suffocating than the last. "You're running late, Your Grace." "I'm aware." "Your mother called twice already." "I'm aware of that too." Richards hesitated, which was unusual. The man had worked for the Ravenshire family for 30 years and rarely broke protocol. But something in Sebastian's face must have looked different that morning, because the older man's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Are you quite all right, sir?" Sebastian looked at him for a long moment. Then he pulled on the charcoal suit and straightened his cuffs. "Define all right." "Back." The hospital event went exactly as planned, which meant it was perfectly choreographed and completely hollow. Sebastian cut the ribbon. He shook hands with administrators who beamed at him like he was royalty instead of just obscenely wealthy aristocracy. He posed for photographs beside children who'd been coached to smile at the right moment. Through it all, he performed his role flawlessly. The concerned nobleman, the generous benefactor, the face of modern British philanthropy. But inside, he felt nothing. A young journalist from the Times cornered him near the exit. "Your Grace, any comment on tonight's expected announcement?" Sebastian's smile didn't waver. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to." "The engagement to Lady Victoria Ashford. Sources say it'll be official by week's end. Sources say a lot of things. But you're not denying it." Sebastian met her eyes and saw the hunger there. The desperation for a story, for something real beneath the polished surface. He almost pitied her. She was young enough to still believe that truth mattered in his world. "I'm denying nothing and confirming nothing. Now, if you'll excuse me." He left her standing there and climbed into the back of his Range Rover, where his assistant Marcus was already typing furiously on his phone. "That was a disaster," Marcus said without looking up. "I answered her question. You didn't answer anything. She's going to write that you're hiding something. Perhaps I am." Marcus finally looked up, his expression sharp. "Sebastian, be serious. Tonight is crucial. Your mother has orchestrated this entire evening. Half of Parliament will be there. If you embarrass the family—" Sebastian cut him off. "What exactly do you think I'm going to do, Marcus? Stand on a table and denounce the aristocracy? Burn my trust fund in the street?" Marcus's jaw tightened. "I think you've been different lately. Distant. And your mother notices everything." The car slid through London traffic, past monuments and museums that Sebastian had been taught to revere since childhood. Symbols of legacy, of duty, of a life mapped out before he was born. "Tell me something," Sebastian said quietly. "When you go home at night, do you ever feel like you're actually living, or does it all just feel like going through motions?" Marcus stared at him. "I'm your assistant, not your therapist. That's not an answer." The silence stretched between them until Marcus finally looked away. "I have work to do," he muttered, returning to his phone. Sebastian watched London blur past the window and wondered what it would feel like to simply open the door and step out into traffic. Not to die, just to feel something real for once. Mauvais. The Carlton Club dinner was exactly the nightmare Sebastian had anticipated. His mother, Duchess Eleanor Ravenshire, held court at the center of the room like a general commanding troops. She wore deep burgundy that made her look both elegant and vaguely predatory. When Sebastian arrived, she caught his eye across the room, and her smile was pure steel wrapped in silk. She found him during the reception, champagne in hand. "You're late. Traffic." "There's no traffic at 7 in the evening on a Tuesday, Sebastian. You simply didn't want to be here." He took a glass from a passing waiter. "You know me so well, Mother." Eleanor's eyes flashed. "We have guests tonight who matter. Lord Pemberton, the Chancellor's wife, Victoria's entire family. This is not the evening for your sulking. I don't sulk. You've perfected it into an art form." A man approached, Lord Ashford, Victoria's father, all manufactured warmth and political calculation. "Sebastian, good to see you, my boy." "Lord Ashford, we should discuss the arrangements, the announcement, the timeline. My daughter is very excited." Sebastian smiled the smile he'd learned to wear like armor. "Of course." But Lord Ashford wasn't finished. "She understands what's expected, naturally. A union like this, it's about more than just two people. It's about legacy, position, the continuation of great families. Naturally." Eleanor appeared at his elbow. "Sebastian, Victoria is just over there. Perhaps you should—" "I see her." And Victoria Ashford was indeed there, standing near the fireplace in a dress that probably cost more than most people earned in a year. She was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, perfect, polished, and completely interchangeable with a dozen other women in the room. When their eyes met, she smiled. It was a pleasant smile, a practiced smile, a smile that said she knew exactly what role she was playing and had long ago accepted it. Sebastian felt something crack inside his chest. "Excuse me?" he said to no one in particular, and walked toward the balcony. "Sebastian," his mother hissed behind him, but he was already gone. The balcony overlooked Pall Mall, and the cold December air hit him like a slap. He gripped the railing and stared down at the street below, where normal people walked past in their normal lives, unaware that somewhere above them a man was suffocating in silk and champagne. His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Where did you go?" He ignored it. Another text, this time from his mother. "Get back inside immediately." He turned off his phone. The door opened behind him. He expected Eleanor, but it was Victoria instead. She stepped out carefully, pulling a shawl around her shoulders. "They're looking for you," she said. "Let them look." She came to stand beside him, not quite close enough to touch. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "This is difficult for you," she finally said. It wasn't a question. Sebastian laughed without humor. "Is it difficult for you?" Victoria considered this. "I stopped thinking about difficulty years ago. This is what we do. What we've always done. Marry people we don't love to preserve empires we didn't build." She turned to look at him, and for the first time he saw something genuine in her expression. Something almost like pity. "Did you think it would be different for you?" she asked. "Did you actually believe you'd get to choose?" The question hung in the frozen air between them. "No," Sebastian said finally. "But I used to hope." Victoria's smile was sad. "Hope is dangerous for people like us." She turned to go back inside, then paused. "For what it's worth," she said, "I'll be a good wife. I'll attend the right events, say the right things, give you the space you need. We don't have to pretend to be in love. We just have to pretend convincingly for everyone else." "And that's enough for you?" Sebastian asked. Victoria met his eyes. "It has to be. What else is there?" She left him alone on the balcony, and Sebastian stood there until the cold made his fingers numb. When he finally went back inside, he smiled at all the right people, said all the right things, and felt himself disappearing a little more with every handshake. The convoy left the Carlton Club at 10:30, 3 black SUVs moving through London like a small military operation. Sebastian sat in the middle vehicle, staring at nothing while Marcus and his security detail discussed routes and schedules. "Take Regent Street," Sebastian said suddenly. "Sir? I want to see the Christmas lights." Marcus exchanged a glance with the driver. "Your Grace, we're already behind schedule." "I don't care about the schedule. Take Regent Street." There was a pause, Then Marcus nodded tightly to the driver. The SUV turned, and suddenly they were moving through crowds of people bundled against the cold, shopping bags in hand, faces lit by thousands of glowing lights strung overhead. Normal people. Happy people. People who weren't trapped in gilded cages pretending to be grateful. Sebastian pressed his forehead against the cold window and watched them pass by. Then he heard it. At first, he thought he was imagining it, a voice cutting through the noise of traffic and crowds, clear and haunting and impossibly beautiful. His head snapped up. "Stop the car, sir! Stop the car, now!" Marcus stared at him. "Your Grace, we can't just—" "Stop the goddamn car," Sebastian repeated, his voice sharp enough to cut. The driver pulled over and the other vehicles in the convoy came to confused halts behind them. Sebastian was already opening the door, stepping out into the freezing night while Marcus shouted something behind him. He pushed through the crowd, following the voice like a man hypnotized. And then he saw her. She stood beneath a canopy of Christmas lights in the middle of the square, singing a cappella to a small crowd that had gathered around her. No microphone, no backing track. Just her voice, raw and perfect, and filled with so much emotion that Sebastian felt something inside him crack wide open. She was young, mid-20s, maybe, with dark hair falling loose around her shoulders and second-hand clothes that had seen better days. Her breath misted in the cold air as she sang, eyes closed, completely lost in the music. The song was something old, something about loneliness and longing, and it hit Sebastian like a physical blow. He stood at the edge of the crowd, this man in a 3,000-pound suit who'd never heard anything so real in his entire life, and listened. Just listened. For the first time in years, he wasn't performing, wasn't calculating, wasn't thinking about what came next. He was just present. When the song ended, the crowd applauded. Some tossed coins into the open guitar case at her feet. The girl opened her eyes and smiled, tired but genuine, and thanked them quietly. "Your Grace." Marcus appeared at his elbow, slightly out of breath. "We need to leave. Your mother is already calling about tomorrow's schedule. The photographers are—" Sebastian held up a hand without looking away from the girl. "Who is she?" he asked. Marcus blinked. "I have no idea. A street performer?" "Sir, please, we really need to—" But Sebastian was already moving forward, pushing gently through the dispersing crowd. The girl was packing up her things when he reached her, carefully folding a worn blanket she'd been standing on. "That was extraordinary," Sebastian heard himself say. She looked up, startled, and he saw her eyes were gray-green, the color of winter seas. "Oh, thanks." She smiled uncertainly. "Glad you liked it." Up close, he could see she was shivering despite her coat. "How long have you been out here?" he asked. "Few hours. It's one of the better spots this time of year. Tourists, you know. You're cold." She laughed. "Yeah, well, comes with the territory." Sebastian realized he was staring and tried to recover. "I'm Sebastian." "Amelia," she said, extending a hand. When their fingers touched, he felt it, a jolt of something electric, something alive, something he couldn't remember ever feeling before. Behind him, Marcus was having a quiet meltdown on his phone. "You're really good," Sebastian said, and immediately felt like an idiot. "That wasn't enough. I've never heard anything like that." Amelia's cheeks colored slightly. "That's kind of you to say." "I mean it." She studied him for a moment, and he had the uncomfortable sensation of being truly seen for the first time in his life. "You okay?" she asked. The question caught him off guard. "I'm sorry. You just look like someone who needs the music. People who need it always have this look." Sebastian opened his mouth to respond, but Marcus was suddenly there, practically vibrating with anxiety. "Sir, I'm very sorry, but we absolutely must go. Now." Sebastian ignored him. "Will you be here tomorrow night?" Amelia glanced at Marcus, clearly sensing the tension. "Probably, if the weather holds." "Sebastian," Marcus said again, more forcefully. "One moment," Sebastian snapped, and Marcus actually stepped back. He turned to Amelia. "I'd like to hear you sing again, if that's all right." She looked confused, but smiled anyway. "It's a public square. You can listen any time you want. Then I'll be back." "Your Grace, please." Sebastian finally let Marcus pull him away, but he looked back once to see Amelia watching him with puzzled curiosity. her breath still misting in the cold air. The convoy ride back to the estate was silent, except for Marcus's furious typing. "What the hell was that?" Marcus finally asked. "I stopped to listen to music." "You don't stop for anything. You certainly don't jump out of moving vehicles in the middle of London to chase street performers." "She's not just a street performer. She's—" "What?" Marcus demanded. "What is she?" Sebastian stared out the window at the dark countryside rolling past. "I don't know yet," he said quietly, "but she made me feel something." Marcus laughed bitterly. "You're engaged, Sebastian, or you will be in 48 hours. To Lady Victoria Ashford, daughter of one of the most powerful families in England. This isn't the time for feeling things." "Then when is the time?" "Never. That's the point. That's what people like us give up." Sebastian turned to look at him. "And you're fine with that?" "It doesn't matter if I'm fine with it. It's reality." The car pulled through the estate gates, and Sebastian saw lights on in every window. His mother would be waiting, ready to dissect every moment of the evening, to plan and strategize and tighten the noose just a little bit more. He thought about Amelia standing in the cold, singing to strangers, and wondered what it would feel like to be that free. Eleanor was in the library, as he knew she would be, with a glass of wine and a tablet showing what appeared to be seating charts. "You left early," she said without looking up. "I was tired." Lord Ashford was disappointed. So was Victoria. I spoke to Victoria. She understood. Eleanor finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. Did she? Or did she simply perform understanding because that's what well-bred women do? Sebastian poured himself a whiskey. "Does it matter?" His mother set down the tablet. "Sit. I'd rather stand. Sit, Sebastian." He sat, whiskey in hand, and waited. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. "You think I don't know what you're going through?" she said finally. "You think I'm some heartless architect of your misery. But I was you once, 27 years old and engaged to your father. A man I'd met 3 times before the wedding." Sebastian said nothing. "I didn't love him," Eleanor continued. "Not at first. Perhaps not ever, in the way romantic novels describe love. But we built something together. A partnership, a legacy, 3 children and an estate that's prospered for generations." "And that's supposed to comfort me?" Sebastian asked. "It's supposed to give you perspective. Love is a luxury people like us can't afford. We have responsibilities that transcend personal happiness." "What if I don't want to transcend it? What if I want to be happy?" Eleanor's smile was pitying. "Then you'd have to stop being a Ravenshire, and we both know you don't have the courage for that." The words hit like a slap. Sebastian stood, setting down his glass with enough force to make it ring against the table. "We'll see about that," he said, and walked out before she could respond. "What?" He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he stood at his bedroom window watching the ground slowly lighten with dawn, thinking about a girl with gray-green eyes who sang in the cold because she needed to, not because anyone told her she should. Somewhere in the house, his phone was buzzing with messages he wouldn't read. Schedules he wouldn't keep. Expectations he was starting to realize he didn't care about anymore. When morning came, he made a decision. He called Marcus at 6 a.m. "Clear my schedule for tonight. You don't have anything tonight. Tomorrow is the announcement breakfast at—" "Clear tomorrow too." "Sebastian, what are you doing?" "Something stupid," he said. "Probably very stupid." He hung up before Marcus could respond, then went to his closet and pulled out clothes he hadn't worn in years. Jeans, a simple sweater, a coat with no designer label. When Richards appeared with his usual morning suit options, he found the Duke of Ravenshire dressed like a regular person, staring at himself in the mirror like he didn't recognize his own reflection. "Will you be needing the car, Your Grace?" "No," Sebastian said. "I'll walk." And he did. London at night was a different city than the one Sebastian knew from car windows and official events. He walked through crowds of people who didn't recognize him, past restaurants and pubs where normal people gathered to live their normal lives, and felt like an anthropologist studying a foreign species. He found himself back at Regent Street before he consciously decided to go there, drawn by the lights and the memory of a voice that had cracked something open inside him. She was there. Amelia stood in almost the same spot, singing a different song this time, something upbeat that had people smiling as they passed. She looked tired but determined, and Sebastian found himself hanging back, just listening, afraid that approaching would somehow break the spell. When she finished, he stepped forward before he could lose his nerve. She looked up and recognized him immediately, her expression surprised. "You came back," she said. "I told you I would." "Yeah, but people say a lot of things they don't mean." She started packing up her equipment. "I'm just about done for the night. Fingers are too cold to play anymore. Can I buy you coffee?" The words were out before Sebastian could second-guess them. Amelia paused, studying him. "You know, most guys who hang around street performers this late are either trying to recruit us for some scam or they're just creepy. I promise I'm neither. That's what a creepy scammer would say." Despite everything, Sebastian laughed. It was real laughter, not the polished version he produced at society functions, and it felt strange in his throat. "Fair point," he said. "But I'm still just someone who liked your music and wants to buy you coffee. No scam, no ulterior motives." Amelia looked at him for a long moment, then smiled. "Okay, but somewhere cheap. You look like the kind of guy who'd pick some pretentious place where coffee costs £12. There's a cafe on this corner, looks terrible. That work? Perfect." Bachotats. The cafe was indeed terrible. Fluorescent lighting, cracked vinyl booths, and coffee that tasted like burned disappointment. It was the best place Sebastian had been in years. They sat across from each other, steam rising from chipped mugs, and for the first time since he could remember, Sebastian had no script to follow. "So what do you do?" Amelia asked. "When you're not stalking street musicians?" Sebastian had prepared for this question. "I work in finance." "Boring stuff." "Boring enough to afford that coat?" He glanced down at his supposedly casual coat, which probably still cost more than a month's rent. "Right." "I do okay." Amelia grinned. "Understatement of the year. But hey, I'm not judging. Someone's got to keep the economy moving." "What about you? How long have you been singing?" "Since I was a kid." "My mom was a singer too. Nothing famous, just pubs and small venues, but she loved it. She wrapped her hands around her mug. She died when I was 16. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "Yeah, well, life happens." She shrugged, but Sebastian saw the pain underneath. "The music helps. Makes me feel close to her, you know?" Sebastian thought about his own family, about legacy and duty, and all the ways love gets buried under expectation. "I do know," he said quietly. They talked for 2 hours about everything and nothing. Amelia told him about growing up in North London, about dropping out of university to pursue music full-time, about the precarious existence of trying to make art in a city that didn't particularly care. Sebastian, carefully editing out anything that might reveal his identity, talked about feeling trapped, about living a life that didn't feel like his own, about the suffocating weight of other people's expectations. "You sound like you need to run away," Amelia said, smiling. "Where would I even go?" "I don't know. Somewhere no one knows your name, somewhere you can just be whoever you want." Sebastian looked at her across the terrible coffee and cracked vinyl and thought he'd never met anyone more real in his entire life. When they finally left, the streets were nearly empty. Amelia pulled her coat tighter against the cold. "This was nice," she said. "Weird, but nice. Can I see you again?" She studied him, and Sebastian had the uncomfortable feeling she could see right through all his careful lies. "You're not married, are you?" she asked suddenly. "No. Girlfriend?" "No." "Not really. It's complicated. It always is," she smiled. "But yeah, you can see me again. I'm here most nights. Unless it rains." "What about somewhere else, somewhere warmer? Are you asking me on a date, finance guy?" Sebastian realized he was. "I think I am," Amelia laughed. "Okay, but nowhere fancy. I mean it. I don't do fancy." "Deal." She wrote her number on a napkin she'd grabbed from the cafe and pressed it into his hand. "Don't make me regret this," she said. "I won't." He watched her walk away into the London night, and only when she disappeared around a corner did he look down at the napkin in his hand. The paper felt like a lit match, like something dangerous and alive. He pulled out his phone and saw 17 missed calls from his mother, 9 from Marcus, and 3 from numbers he didn't recognize but could guess were related to the Ashford family. Tomorrow morning, there would be consequences. Tomorrow morning, his entire world would demand explanations. But standing on that cold street corner with a napkin clutched in his hand and the taste of terrible coffee on his lips, Sebastian Ravenshire felt something he hadn't felt in years. He felt alive. And whatever happened next, he wasn't going back. The morning after Sebastian walked away from that cafe with Amelia's number burning a hole in his pocket, he woke to find his mother standing at the foot of his bed. Not knocking, not waiting. Just standing there in the gray dawn light like some elegant executioner, arms crossed, face carved from marble. "Get up," Eleanor said. Sebastian sat up slowly, his head still foggy from 3 hours of sleep and too many thoughts spiraling in the dark. "What time is it?" "Time for you to explain where you were last night, and the night before, and why Lord Ashford's office called at midnight asking if you were ill because you missed the pre-announcement dinner." The words came back to him in pieces. The dinner. Right. The one where they were supposed to finalize details, smile for private photographs, rehearse the performance of a lifetime. "I forgot." Eleanor's laugh was sharp enough to cut glass. "You forgot. You forgot a dinner that's been on your calendar for 6 weeks. A dinner that half of London's elite attended. A dinner where Victoria sat alone for 2 hours while I made excuses for you." Sebastian swung his legs out of bed, suddenly too angry to care about diplomacy. "Did it ever occur to you that maybe I don't want to marry Victoria? That maybe I'm tired of having my entire life planned by committee?" His mother moved faster than he expected, closing the distance between them until she was close enough that he could see the fury in her eyes. "What you want is irrelevant," she said quietly. "What you want has always been irrelevant. You are a Ravenshire. You don't get to have wants. Everyone gets to have wants." "No." Eleanor's voice dropped to something almost pitying. "Poor people get to have wants. Middle-class people get to have wants. People with nothing to lose get to dream about happiness and love and all those pretty lies. We don't. We have duty. We have legacy. We have the weight of 10 generations on our shoulders. And if you think I'm going to let you throw that away because you're having some kind of quarter-life crisis..." "I met someone." The words hung in the air between them like a bomb waiting to detonate. Eleanor stared at him. Then she laughed. Actually laughed. A sound completely devoid of humor. "You met someone?" She shook her head. "Of course you did. Let me guess. Some girl you saw at a bar? A waitress? An actress trying to sleep her way into society? She's a singer. Even better." His mother turned away, pacing to the window. "Sebastian, I'm going to say this once. Whatever you think you're feeling, it's not real. It's rebellion dressed up as romance. You're scared of the commitment, so you've invented an escape fantasy." "She's not a fantasy." "Then what is she?" Eleanor spun back to face him. "What's her name? Where did you meet her? Does she know who you are?" Sebastian hesitated, and his mother pounced on the silence. "She doesn't know, does she? She thinks you're some normal man, someone without responsibilities or consequences. And you let her think that because it makes you feel free." She crossed her arms. "But you're not free, Sebastian. You never have been. And when she finds out the truth, when she realizes what being with you actually means, she'll run. They always do. You don't know that. I know women. I know what they want. And what they don't want is the reality of this life, the scrutiny, the press, the endless obligations. You think your little singer is going to smile gracefully through state dinners and charity galas? You think she's going to handle photographers dissecting her every outfit, her every word? Maybe she won't have to. Maybe I'll..." "What?" Eleanor demanded. "Walk away? Renounce your title? Give up everything you are?" She moved closer. "You couldn't survive a week without this life. You've never worked a day in your life. Never worried about money or housing or any of the things normal people deal with. You wouldn't last a month." The words hit harder because part of Sebastian knew they might be true. He'd grown up in palaces and private schools. He'd never filled out a job application or worried about rent. His rebellion was theoretical, untested against the brutal machinery of actual survival. But then he thought about Amelia singing in the cold, building a life out of nothing but her voice and determination, and something hardened in him. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "Maybe I wouldn't last a month, but at least I'd be alive." Eleanor's face went very still. "If you pursue this," she said, each word precisely measured, "you will destroy this family. The Ashfords will withdraw their support. Half our business alliances will collapse. Your siblings will pay the price for your selfishness. And when it all falls apart, when your little singer realizes she can't actually live on love and poetry, you'll come crawling back." But the door will be closed, Sebastian. I will make certain of it. Then I guess I'd better not come crawling back. He pushed past her and headed for the bathroom, locking the door behind him before she could respond. He stood under the shower until he heard her leave, and only then did he let himself shake. Marcus was waiting in the breakfast room with 3 tablets, 2 phones, and an expression that suggested he hadn't slept either. "We need to do damage control," he said without preamble. "The Ashfords are furious, but willing to overlook last night if you make a public appearance with Victoria this afternoon. There's a Christmas charity event at—" "I'm not going." Marcus blinked. "I'm sorry?" "I said I'm not going, not to the event, not to the announcement, not to any of it. Sebastian, be reasonable." "I've been reasonable my entire life." He poured himself coffee with hands that weren't quite steady. "I'm done being reasonable." "Then what are you going to be?" Marcus demanded. "Because from where I'm sitting, you're about to blow up your entire life over a woman you've met twice, 3 times. And it's not about her. It's about me. That's the most selfish thing I've ever heard you say." "Good. Maybe I should have been selfish years ago." Marcus stared at him, and Sebastian saw something shift in his assistant's face. Not anger. Something closer to pity. "You really think you can do this, don't you? You think you can just walk away from everything and it'll be fine? That love conquers all, and society will accept your choices because they're authentic or brave or whatever you're telling yourself?" "I don't know what I think." Sebastian met his eyes. "But I know I can't marry Victoria. I know I can't spend the rest of my life pretending to be someone I'm not." "Then who are you?" The question landed like a physical blow because Sebastian didn't have an answer. He'd spent so long being the Duke, playing the role, meeting the expectations, that he'd never stopped to ask what existed underneath. "I don't know yet," he admitted, "but I want to find out." Marcus gathered his tablets and phones with mechanical precision. "I'll tender my resignation this afternoon," he said quietly. "What?" "No. Marcus, I can't watch you do this. I've worked for your family for 8 years. I've believed in what we were building, and I can't stand here and help you destroy it." He walked out before Sebastian could respond, leaving him alone with cold coffee and the dawning realization that every choice had a price. He texted Amelia at noon. "Can I see you tonight?" Her response came 5 minutes later. "Depends. Are you going to make this a habit?" "Maybe. Is that okay?" "I'll allow it. Same spot, 8 p.m. Don't be late." Sebastian stared at the messages and felt something loosen in his chest. She had no idea who he was, no idea what he was risking. To her, he was just a guy who liked her music, a guy who bought terrible coffee and asked awkward questions. The simplicity of it felt like oxygen after a lifetime of drowning. Mont. He spent the afternoon fielding calls he didn't answer and texts he didn't read. His younger sister Arabella cornered him in the library around 3. "Mum says you're having a breakdown," she said, perching on the arm of a leather chair. "Mum says a lot of things." "Are you? Having a breakdown?" Sebastian looked at her, this girl who was only 22 but already being groomed for a strategic marriage of her own, already learning to smile through the suffocation. "What would you do?" he asked, "if you could do anything? If there were no expectations, no legacy, no consequences?" Arabella considered this. "I'd probably travel. See places that aren't on the approved list. Date someone Mum would hate." She smiled, but there was sadness in it. "But that's fantasy. We don't get to do those things." "Why not?" "Because we're Ravenshires. It's in the DNA at this point. Duty before happiness. Legacy before love." She studied him. "But you're thinking about trying, aren't you?" "Maybe." She reached over and squeezed his hand. "Then I hope it works. I hope you get out. Someone should." "What about you?" Arabella laughed softly. "I'm not as brave as you. I'll marry whoever they pick. I'll have the right children and attend the right parties. And I'll probably be fine." She met his eyes. "But I'll always wonder what it would have been like to choose." After she left, Sebastian sat in the library surrounded by books about honor and tradition and the glory of their family name, and he wanted to burn it all down. But he left the estate at 7, wearing jeans and a scarf pulled high enough to hide most of his face. The security detail tried to follow, but he took the tube instead of a car, lost himself in crowds, moved through London like a ghost. Amelia was already playing when he arrived. A small crowd gathered around her. She was singing something jazzy tonight, her voice playful and warm. And Sebastian stood at the back, just watching her come alive in the music. When she finished and people dispersed, she spotted him and grinned. "You came back again. I'm starting to think you're obsessed." Guilty. She packed up her guitar. "So, mystery finance guy, what's the plan? More terrible coffee? I was thinking we could walk. If you're not too cold." "Walk where?" "Anywhere. Everywhere." "I don't care." She studied him, and he wondered what she saw. The cracks showing through his careful performance, the desperation leaking out around the edges. "Okay," she said finally. "But if you turn out to be a serial killer, I'm going to be really disappointed." They walked along the Thames, the water black and glittering under city lights. Amelia talked about a gig she was trying to book at a small club in Shoreditch, about the politics of street performing, about a song she was writing that wouldn't come together right. Sebastian mostly listened, asking questions, learning her rhythms. She had this way of talking with her hands, gesturing as she explained things, completely unself-conscious. It made his chest ache. "You're quiet tonight," she observed. "Sorry. Just tired. Work stuff?" "Something like that." They sat on a bench near Tower Bridge, and Amelia pulled her knees up to her chest. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Anything. Why do you seem so sad?" The question caught him off guard. "I'm not sad." "Yes, you are. You hide it pretty well, but it's there. Like you're carrying something heavy." Sebastian looked out at the water and decided to risk the truth, or at least a version of it. "I'm supposed to get engaged," he said quietly. "Soon. To someone I don't love." Amelia went very still. "Oh, it's expected. My family. They have this whole plan for my life, and I'm supposed to follow it. And I've always followed it, until recently." "What changed recently?" "I heard someone singing in a Christmas market." He looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt something real. Amelia's expression was unreadable. "Sebastian, I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other, but being here with you, talking to you, it's the only time I feel like myself." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Who are you, really?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications. "Just someone trying to figure out how to live," he said. It wasn't an answer, and they both knew it. But Amelia didn't push. Instead, she reached over and took his hand. "Life's too short to marry people you don't love," she said. "My mom used to say that. She married my dad because she loved him, even though he was broke and her parents disowned her for it. They had 10 good years before he died. She never regretted it." "What happened to him?" "Car accident. I was 4. She squeezed his hand. "But she always said those 10 years were worth everything. That real love is worth any price." Sebastian felt something crack open in his chest. What if the price is everything I am? Then maybe you need to figure out who you are without all the things you think define you. They sat there as the city moved around them, and Sebastian tried to imagine a version of himself that existed independent of title, wealth, expectation. The image was blurry, terrifying, and oddly thrilling. When he walked her to the tube station later, Amelia paused at the entrance. "I like you, mystery finance guy," she said, "but I get the feeling you're running from something. And eventually, whatever it is catches up." "I know. Just don't let it catch up to me too, okay? I've got enough chaos in my life. I'll do my best." She went up on her toes and kissed his cheek, quick and warm, then disappeared into the station before he could respond. Sebastian stood on the street corner, touching the spot where her lips had been, and felt the world tilting under his feet. Tchask. The photographs appeared the next morning. Sebastian was having breakfast when Marcus burst in, tablet extended like a weapon. "Have you seen this?" On the screen was a grainy image of Sebastian and Amelia on the bench by Tower Bridge. His face was partially obscured by his scarf, but the angle was clear enough. Another shot showed them at the tube station, her kissing his cheek. The headline read, "Mystery Woman Spotted with Duke Sebastian Ravenshire." "Oh God," Sebastian breathed. Marcus was already scrolling. "There are 6 different publications running it. The Mail has a whole expose speculating about who she is. Someone at the Times recognized her from her busking spot. They have her name? Not yet. But they will." His assistant looked up. "Sebastian, you have maybe 12 hours before they identify her. Maybe less. And when they do, her life is over. That's dramatic. Is it? Marcus pulled up another article. This is what they did to your cousin's girlfriend. 5 years of her life documented and dissected. Every ex-boyfriend interviewed. Her family harassed. Photos of her in secondary school circulated online. She had to change her name and move to Australia. That was different. It's never different. This is what happens. And Amelia seems like a nice girl, but she has no idea what's coming. Sebastian felt ice spreading through his veins. We have to warn her. And tell her what? That you lied about who you are? That you're not some finance guy, but actually one of the most prominent aristocrats in England? That by knowing you, she's about to become the most hunted woman in London? Yes. Marcus stared at him. You're really going to do this. You're going to destroy her life because you're having a crisis. I'm going to tell her the truth and let her decide. And if she runs, then she runs. But Marcus was shaking his head. You don't get it. It's already too late. The moment those photos published, she stopped being a person and became a story. Whether she stays with you or runs, they're going to tear her apart. Then I'll protect her. How? You can't even protect yourself. The words hit like a punch, but Sebastian stood up anyway. I need to find her. Now. He tried calling. No answer. He texted. Nothing. By noon, he was back in Regent Street, but Georgian Street, but the spot where she usually performed was empty. A different busker, an older man with a weathered guitar, looked up when Sebastian approached. You looking for Mia? Sebastian's heart jumped. Yes. Have you seen her? Not today. But I saw the photos. The man's expression was sympathetic. She's probably scared, mate. Press has already been sniffing around asking questions. Did they talk to her? Don't know. But they talked to everyone else. Tried to get me to tell them her full name, where she lives. He shook his head. I didn't say nothing. Most of us didn't. But someone will. They always do. Sebastian felt panic rising. If you see her, can you tell her I'm looking for her? Tell her I need to explain. Sure, mate, but bit of advice, whatever explanation you got, it better be good. He finally found her at 6 that evening in a small cafe in Camden. Not the terrible one they'd gone to before, but something similar, cheap, anonymous, safe. She was sitting in the back corner, hood up, hands wrapped around a mug like it was the only solid thing in her universe. When Sebastian slid into the seat across from her, she didn't look up. So, she said quietly, Duke Sebastian Ravenshire. That's quite the job title for a finance guy. Amelia. She finally met his eyes, and he saw hurt there, anger, betrayal. I Googled you after I saw the photos. After journalists started calling me, messaging me, showing up at my flat asking who I was and what we were doing together. She laughed bitterly. Imagine my surprise when I learned that the sad guy who liked my music is actually worth more than my entire neighborhood. That his family basically owns half of England. That he's engaged to some aristocrat who looks like she's stepped out of a fashion magazine. I'm not engaged, not officially. But you were supposed to be. That's what the articles say. Big announcement coming any day. She leaned forward. Were you ever going to tell me, or was this just some slumming adventure? Rich boy plays at being normal, has a bit of fun with the street musician, then goes back to his real life? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Help me understand why you lied to me. Sebastian felt the words catching in his throat. Because when I'm with you, I'm not the Duke. I'm not a Ravenshire. I'm just Sebastian. And I haven't been just Sebastian since I was a child. Amelia's eyes glistened. That's very poetic. But it doesn't change the fact that you lied. That you let me think we were both just normal people trying to connect when actually we're from completely different universes. I know. There are 23 journalists camped outside my building right now. 23. Asking my neighbors about me. Going through my social media. One of them called my aunt in Liverpool. My aunt, Sebastian, I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix this. She wiped her eyes angrily. I can't go home. I can't perform. I can't do anything without someone following me with a camera. My entire life has been turned inside out in 12 hours. I'll make it stop. How? You can't control the press. You said it yourself. Your family has expectations, rules, and I'm not part of that world. I never will be. Sebastian reached across the table, but she pulled her hands back. Don't, she said. please don't make this harder. I'm not engaged to Victoria. I'm not going to marry her. I've told my family that. And they just accepted it? Just said, okay, sure, marry the busker instead? He said nothing, and his silence was answer enough. That's what I thought. Amelia stood up. I need you to leave me alone, Sebastian. I need you to go back to your palace or estate or whatever and let me put my life back together. Amelia, please. I mean it. She was crying now, not hiding it. This was a mistake. We were a mistake, and I need it to stop before it destroys everything I've worked for. She walked out, and Sebastian sat frozen in the booth, watching her disappear into the Camden crowds. The next 72 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, arguments, and ultimatums. His mother presented him with a formal statement to release, declaring the photos a misunderstanding and confirming his engagement to Victoria. Sebastian refused. Lord Ashford visited personally, his earlier warmth replaced with cold fury. His daughter's reputation had been damaged, he declared. The family expected immediate action. Sebastian told him there would be no engagement. The Ashfords withdrew from 3 major business partnerships. The press coverage intensified. Someone leaked Amelia's full name, her address, her entire history. Her social media filled with comments from people who'd never met her, some sympathetic, most cruel. Sebastian tried calling her 17 times. She never answered. On the 4th day, Victoria herself appeared at the estate. They met in the same library where this had all begun, and she looked at him with something close to contempt. You've made us both look like fools, she said without preamble. I never meant... I don't care what you meant. She cut him off. I care what you did. You humiliated my family. You made me an object of pity. And for what? A girl you barely know? I care about her. You care about the idea of her, the fantasy of escaping your life. Victoria's voice was sharp as glass. But caring isn't enough, Sebastian. It never is. Because eventually, the fantasy collides with reality, and reality always wins. Not always. Always. She moved to leave, then paused. The girl was smart to walk away. I hope she stays away. For her sake. After she left, Sebastian stood at the window and watched winter rain fall on the Ravenshire grounds, and for the first time in his life, he understood what it meant to have no good options. Took. He found Amelia's friend, another busker, on his 5th day of searching. The man was reluctant at first, but something in Sebastian's face must have convinced him. She's staying with mates in Brixton, he said, trying to lay low until the press gets bored. But between you and me? She's a mess. Hasn't performed since the story broke. Just stays inside. Sebastian felt his heart clench. Can you give her a message? Already did. She doesn't want to hear from you. Please, just tell her I need 5 minutes. Tell her I'll go anywhere, do anything. Tell her... Mate. The busker's voice was kind but firm. She's been through hell because of you. The best thing you can do is leave her alone. But Sebastian couldn't. That night he sat down and wrote a letter. Not an email or a text, but an actual letter on paper. Words he couldn't take back. Amelia, I know I have no right to ask you to read this. I know I've already taken too much from you. But I need you to understand something. You were right. I lied to you. I let you think I was someone I'm not. And I've spent the last week trying to figure out why. I think it's because I've never known who I am outside of being a Ravenshire. My entire identity has been built on duty, legacy, expectation. And then I heard you sing, and for the first time I felt something that was mine. Not my family's, not society's. Mine. I fell in love with you, Amelia. Not with the idea of you or the fantasy of escape. With you. The way you talk with your hands, the way you care about your music, the way you're brave enough to build a life out of nothing but talent and determination. I know I've destroyed your peace. I know the press has been cruel. I know I've given you every reason to hate me. But I'm not going to marry Victoria. I'm not going back to that life. And if you'll let me, I want to find a new life. One that's honest, one that's real, one that's ours. If you need me to disappear, I will. If you need me to publicly deny everything, I'll do it. Whatever you need to feel safe again, I'll make it happen. But if there's any part of you that felt what I felt, any part that believes we could be something real, I'll be waiting at our terrible cafe tomorrow night at 8, the one in Camden where we first talked. I'll wait as long as it takes. You told me your mother said real love is worth any price. I'm starting to understand what she meant. Sebastian. He gave the letter to her busker friend with enough cash to ensure it got delivered, then went home and waited. 8 p.m. came and went. 9. 10. Sebastian sat in the terrible cafe drinking terrible coffee and watching the door. At 11, the owner started closing up. "Sorry, mate," he said. "We're done for the night." Sebastian stood up, left money on the table, and walked out into the London cold. He'd gambled everything on her showing up, and he'd lost. He was halfway to the tube station when he heard it. "Sebastian." He turned. Amelia stood under a streetlight, hands shoved in her pockets, eyes red like she'd been crying. But she was there. She'd come. "I got your letter," she said. He couldn't breathe. And it was romantic and stupid and completely unfair because you're asking me to believe in something that's probably going to destroy me. I know. My entire life has been about being independent, about not needing anyone, about building something that's mine. She stepped closer. And you're asking me to risk all of that on feelings I've had for less than a week. I know, he said again. I know it's insane. It is insane. She was crying now. It's completely insane. And I've spent 4 days trying to talk myself out of it, trying to be smart and practical and safe. And Amelia looked up at him, and despite the tears, she was smiling. And apparently I'm not as smart as I thought I was. She closed the distance between them, and when their lips met, it felt like the whole city stopped breathing. The kiss was desperate and messy and perfect, tasting of salt and coffee, and the reckless courage of two people choosing each other despite every logical reason not to. When they finally pulled apart, Sebastian rested his forehead against hers. "This is going to be hard," he whispered. "Harder than hard. The press is going to be brutal. Probably. My family is going to fight us every step. I'd be disappointed if they didn't." He laughed, the sound surprised out of him. "Why are you doing this?" Amelia pulled back to look at him, her eyes clear despite the tears. "Because you're right, real love is worth any price. And I'd rather have something real and difficult than something easy and empty." She took his hand. "But we do this together," she said firmly. "No more lies, no more hiding. We're in this. We're all in." "All in," Sebastian agreed. They walked through London together, hand in hand, and behind them the terrible cafe went dark. Ahead of them, the city glittered with lights and possibilities and the absolute certainty that everything was about to get infinitely more complicated. But for the first time in his life, Sebastian Ravenshire wasn't afraid. He jumped, and there was no going back. For 3 weeks, Sebastian and Amelia existed in a strange pocket of stolen happiness that felt too fragile to be real. They moved carefully through London like fugitives, always watching for cameras, always one step ahead of the press that hunted them with the dedication of wolves tracking wounded prey. Amelia had stopped performing in public spaces. The risk was too high, the photographers too persistent. Instead, she sang in small underground venues where Sebastian sat in the back wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap, feeling ridiculous but not caring because her voice still cracked him open every single time. They rented a small flat in Hackney under a friend's name, a place so ordinary it felt like luxury precisely because no one knew about it. 2 rooms and a kitchen barely big enough to turn around in, but it was theirs. A space where Sebastian could be just a man and Amelia could be just a woman, and the weight of the outside world couldn't quite reach them. But weight has a way of finding you eventually. Sebastian was making coffee on a Tuesday morning when Amelia emerged from the bedroom holding her phone, her face drained of color. "You need to see this," she said. The article was from a tabloid, not one of the respectable papers, but that didn't matter. The headline screamed in bold letters, "Ravenshire, fortune in jeopardy, as Duke abandons duty for busker." But it was the details underneath that made Sebastian's stomach drop. Someone had leaked financial documents, contracts between the Ravenshire estate and various business partners, letters from board members expressing concern about Sebastian's stability, and most damning, a detailed breakdown of exactly how much money the family stood to lose if he continued his relationship with Amelia. £300 million. That was the number in bold at the bottom of the article. The Ashford Alliance alone represented investments worth over $100 million. The Carlton Club had suspended the family's membership, pending review. 2 major charities had withdrawn the Ravenshire name from their boards. And there, at the end of the article, was a quote from an unnamed family source. He's destroying everything our family built for a woman he barely knows. At some point, we have to ask if Sebastian is mentally fit to manage the estate. Amelia was staring at him. Is this true? 300 million? Sebastian set down his coffee cup before his shaking hands could drop it. I knew there would be financial consequences. I didn't know they'd be this severe. This isn't just severe, Sebastian. This is catastrophic. She scrolled through the article. They're questioning your mental fitness. They're talking about removing you from estate management. They can't do that. Can't they? You're the one who told me your family controls everything. That duty and legacy are everything. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Don't, she said quietly. Don't touch me right now because I need to think clearly, and I can't do that when you're close. Amelia, you told me you were walking away from an engagement. You told me it would be hard. You never told me you were gambling 300 million pounds on us, that your entire family's future was on the line. I didn't think... Exactly. You didn't think. She was crying now, angry tears that she wiped away furiously. You were so busy playing at being normal, so focused on escaping your life, that you never stopped to consider what you were actually destroying. That's not fair. Isn't it? Her voice rose. I'm a street musician, Sebastian. I make maybe 20,000 pounds a year if I'm lucky. You're risking an amount of money I can't even conceptualize. And you didn't think I had a right to know that? You're making this about money. It is about money. It's about power and responsibility, and the fact that your decisions affect hundreds of people who work for your estate, who depend on those investments, who trusted you to make rational choices. So falling for you was irrational? The question hung between them like a blade. Amelia sank onto the couch, her fight draining away into something closer to despair. I don't know, she whispered. Maybe it was. For both of us. The real explosion came that afternoon when Sebastian returned to the Ravenshire estate for the first time in weeks. He'd been summoned by the family solicitor, a man named Gerald Pemberton, who'd managed Ravenshire affairs for 30 years and had never once raised his voice. He was raising it now. You have systematically dismantled generations of careful alliance building in less than a month, Gerald said, pacing his office like a caged animal. The Ashfords, the Pembrokes, half of the Carlton Club. Do you have any idea what you've done? Sebastian sat across from him, trying to project a calm he didn't feel. I've made my personal life my own business. Your personal life stopped being your own business the day you inherited the title. Gerald slapped a folder onto the desk between them. These are the contracts we've lost, the partnerships that have been suspended, the charities reconsidering our involvement. Shall I read them to you? I can read. Then read this. Gerald opened the folder to reveal a legal document, dense with official language and seal stamps. This is a petition filed by your mother and the Board of Estate Managers to have you declared temporarily unfit to manage the Ravenshire holdings. They're citing erratic behavior, refusal to honor commitments, and demonstrable harm to the estate's financial standing. Sebastian felt ice spreading through his veins. They can't do this. They can and they are. The hearing is scheduled for next week. If they succeed, control of the estate passes to your mother until such time as you're deemed fit to resume responsibilities, which means never. Sebastian stood up. She'll never give it back. Then perhaps you shouldn't have given her cause to take it. I fell in love. That's not a crime. Gerald's expression softened slightly, the first hint of humanity breaking through professional outrage. No, he said quietly. It's not a crime, but it is a luxury you couldn't afford. He sat down heavily. Sebastian, I've known you since you were a boy. I've watched you grow into the role you were born to fill, and I've seen the weight of it crush you slowly over the years. Then you understand. I understand that you're unhappy, that you feel trapped, but understanding doesn't change reality. He gestured to the documents. This is what rebellion costs in your world. Not just your freedom, but the stability of everyone who depends on you. So what am I supposed to do? Marry Victoria and pretend to be grateful? I'm supposed to tell you yes. Gerald pulled off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. As your solicitor, as someone who's dedicated his life to protecting this family, I'm supposed to tell you to end this relationship, apologize to the Ashfords, and salvage what you can. But as someone who once loved a woman my family didn't approve of, who chose duty over love, and has regretted it for 40 years. He met Sebastian's eyes. I can't tell you that happiness doesn't matter. Because it does, even when it shouldn't. What happened to her? The woman you loved? She married someone else, had 3 children. I see her sometimes at charity events with her husband. And every time I wonder what my life would have been like if I'd been braver. The confession hung in the air between them. So what do I do? Sebastian asked. Gerald put his glasses back on and returned to being the solicitor. You prepare for the hearing. You make a case for why you should retain control. And you decide what you're willing to sacrifice. Because, Sebastian, they're going to make you choose. The estate or the girl. You won't get both. The hearing was exactly as brutal as Sebastian had feared. It took place in a private conference room at the solicitor's office, but the atmosphere was pure tribunal. His mother sat at one end of the long table, flanked by 3 board members and 2 lawyers. Sebastian sat at the other end with Gerald beside him, and the space between them felt like a chasm that couldn't be crossed. Eleanor Ravenshire opened the proceedings with surgical precision. This isn't personal, she began, which Sebastian knew meant it was entirely personal. This is about protecting an institution that's existed for 10 generations. An institution that my son is currently destroying through reckless and irrational behavior. She presented evidence methodically. Financial statements showing declining partnerships. Letters from board members expressing concern. Testimony from the family's business advisors about the long-term damage to the Ravenshire reputation. And then she showed the photographs. Dozens of them. Sebastian and Amelia walking through London, kissing outside the Hackney flat, entering cheap restaurants and underground music venues, each image projected onto a screen, evidence of a duke behaving like a common person. These photographs have been published in 17 different outlets, Eleanor said. Our family has become tabloid fodder, a source of speculation and gossip. The Ravenshire name, which once commanded respect, is now associated with scandal. One of the board members, Lord Hartwell, spoke up. With all due respect, Your Grace, many young people go through phases of rebellion. Perhaps given time. This isn't a phase, Eleanor cut him off. My son has made it clear he intends to continue this relationship indefinitely. He's refused all attempts at reconciliation with the Ashford family. He's abandoned his responsibilities to pursue a fantasy. It's not a fantasy, Sebastian said quietly. The room went silent. She's a real person, he continued, his voice gaining strength. Her name is Amelia Hart. She's a musician. She's talented and brave and more genuine than anyone in this room. And I love her. Eleanor's expression didn't change. Love is irrelevant. To you, maybe. Not to me. Then you're admitting you're prioritizing personal feelings over institutional responsibility? It was a trap, and Sebastian knew it, but he walked into it anyway. Yes. Eleanor looked at the board members. You see? He admits it himself. He's chosen his own desires over the welfare of the estate, over the livelihoods of everyone who depends on us. Sebastian turned to Gerald. Say something. But his solicitor's face was resigned. They've made their case, he said quietly. Now you need to make yours. Sebastian stood up, facing the assembled power structure that had controlled his entire life. You're right, he said. I have put my personal happiness ahead of estate politics. I have refused to marry someone I don't love. I have walked away from alliances that were supposed to define my future. Eleanor smiled thinly, sensing victory. But Sebastian wasn't finished. And do you know what I've learned? That all of this, he gestured to the documents, the photographs, the room itself, is built on the idea that we're somehow different from other people, that our blood makes us special, that duty to dead ancestors matters more than living an honest life. Lord Hartwell shifted uncomfortably. I've spent my entire life believing that, Sebastian continued, believing I had no choice. But Amelia showed me something different. She builds her life every single day through her own effort. No inheritance, no name, just her talent and her courage. And she's more successful in any way that actually matters than I've ever been. That's a lovely speech, Eleanor said coldly, but it doesn't change the numbers. You've cost this family £300 million and counting. Money you'll make back in 5 years through investments that would happen regardless of who I marry. That's not the point. Then what is the point, Mother? Because from where I'm sitting, this isn't about protecting the estate. It's about control. It's about making sure I stay in line, stay obedient, stay trapped in the same gilded cage that trapped you. Eleanor's composure cracked for the first time. You think I'm trapped? I built this estate into what it is today. I saved it from your father's mismanagement. I created stability where there was chaos. And what did it cost you? The question landed like a physical blow. What did you give up? Sebastian pressed. To be the perfect duchess. What parts of yourself did you bury so deep you can't even remember they existed? Eleanor stood up, her face white with fury. This hearing is over. The board will vote tomorrow. I expect the decision will be unanimous. She swept out of the room, her lawyer scrambling to follow. Lord Hartwell approached Sebastian as the others filed out. That was unwise, he said quietly. You've made this personal now. She won't back down. Was it ever anything but personal? The older man sighed. For what it's worth, I understand what you're trying to do, but understanding doesn't change votes. He paused at the door. Prepare yourself, Sebastian. You're going to lose. Confronting. Amelia was waiting when Sebastian returned to the Hackney flat. She'd been crying, he could tell, but she'd cleaned up her face and put on tea like that would somehow make the world less brutal. How bad? She asked. They're voting tomorrow. Gerald thinks it's a foregone conclusion, so they're taking everything. Everything that made me a Ravenshire. He sat down heavily. The title stays. Can't strip that. But control of the estate, the money, the power, all of it goes to my mother. And there's nothing you can do? Sebastian thought about the folder Gerald had slipped him after the hearing. A contingency plan. A way to challenge the decision. But it would require exposing family secrets, dragging his mother's past into public scrutiny, destroying what was left of the Ravenshire reputation. It would be mutually assured destruction. There might be something, he said slowly, but it would hurt everyone. My mother, my siblings, the entire family. And I don't know if I'm willing to do that. Amelia set down her teacup with a sharp click. Let me make sure I understand this. They're trying to destroy you. They're taking everything you have, declaring you unfit, treating you like a child who can't make his own decisions. And you're worried about hurting them? They're still my family. They stopped being your family the moment they chose the estate over you. The truth of it hit Sebastian like cold water. She was right. His mother hadn't asked what would make him happy or how to support his choices. She'd simply moved to eliminate the threat to her control. Love in the Ravenshire world was always conditional on obedience. The folder Gerald had given him contained proof that Eleanor had used estate funds for personal investments years ago. Nothing illegal, technically, but ethically questionable and certainly grounds to challenge her fitness to manage the holdings. If Sebastian released it, he could probably block her takeover, but it would destroy her reputation, make her look corrupt, turn the family into exactly the kind of scandal she'd spent her life avoiding. I can't do it, he said finally. I won't become like them. Amelia looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. It was bitter and tired and full of resignation. You're a better person than I am, she said, because if someone tried to take everything from me, I'd burn them to the ground without blinking. That's the difference between us. You fight for what's yours. I was raised to never fight at all. Then maybe, Amelia said quietly, it's time you learned. The vote happened at 10 a.m. the next morning. Sebastian wasn't allowed to attend. He sat in Gerald's office drinking coffee that had gone cold hours ago and waiting for the phone to ring. When it finally did, Gerald's face told him everything before the words came. I'm sorry, the solicitor said. The vote was unanimous. Your mother assumes control of the estate effective immediately. You retain the title and a generous allowance, but all management decisions now go through her. Sebastian set down the phone very carefully, afraid if he moved too quickly, something inside him would break. What happens now? Gerald hesitated. Now you have 30 days to challenge the decision if you choose to. After that, it becomes permanent unless circumstances change significantly, meaning unless I end things with Amelia and beg forgiveness. That would certainly be considered a significant change in circumstances, yes. After Gerald hung up, Sebastian sat in the silence of the empty office and felt the walls of his entire life closing in. He pulled out his phone and looked at the photos stored there. Pictures of Amelia singing, Amelia laughing at something ridiculous he'd said. Amelia asleep in the terrible Hackney flat that had somehow become more of a home than the Ravenshire estate ever was. And he thought about what kind of man he wanted to be. The kind who rolled over when power said to heel, or the kind who fought back. He found his mother in her private study that evening. She was reviewing documents, reading glasses perched on her nose, every inch the efficient administrator. She didn't look up when he entered. "If you're here to plead," Eleanor said, "save your breath." "I'm not here to plead." "Then what do you want?" She finally met his eyes. "To tell me I'm a monster? To explain how I've ruined your life? I've heard it all before, Sebastian. From your father, actually, in the years before he died. He thought I was too controlling, too." "Were you?" "I was effective. There's a difference." Sebastian placed the folder on her desk. Eleanor stared at it like it was a bomb. "What is this?" she asked. "Open it." She did slowly, and he watched her face go pale as she recognized her own signatures, her own transactions, laid out in damning detail. "Where did you get this?" "Does it matter?" "What matters is what happens if I release it to the board, if I challenge your fitness the way you challenged mine." Eleanor's hands were shaking. This was years ago, a different time. I was protecting the estate. "The same way you're protecting it now? By taking from your own family?" His mother carefully closed the folder. "If you release this, you'll destroy me. You understand that? I'll lose everything, the respect, the position, everything I've built." "I know. So this is blackmail. This is leverage." Sebastian leaned forward. "You taught me that everything is negotiation, that power respects power. So here's my negotiation. You reverse the vote, restore my control, and accept my relationship with Amelia. And in return, this folder stays private." Eleanor stood up, and for the first time in his life, Sebastian saw her look truly old. "If I do this," she said quietly, "I'll be seen as weak. The board will question my judgment. Everything I've spent 30 years building will crumble. Then I guess we both lose something, don't we?" They stood on opposite sides of the desk, mother and son, locked in the kind of war that destroys families. "I need time to think," Eleanor finally said. "You have 24 hours. Sebastian walked out before she could respond, and the victory felt like ash in his mouth. He returned to the Hackney flat to find it dark and empty. Amelia's things were gone. Her guitar. Her clothes. The few books she'd scattered around. All of it vanished like she'd never been there at all. On the kitchen counter was a note, handwritten on torn paper. "Sebastian, I can't do this anymore. Not because I don't love you. I do. More than I should. But I've spent the last few days watching you destroy yourself and everyone around you, and I've realized something. This isn't sustainable. This war between you and your family, it's going to consume everything, and I can't be the reason you lose yourself. You think you're fighting for us, but really, you're fighting yourself. Fighting the person they made you into. And that's a fight you need to have alone. I'm going back to Manchester for a while. Back to where I grew up. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not caught in the middle of your family's war. I hope you find what you're looking for. I hope you become whoever you're supposed to be. But I can't be there while you figure it out. I'm sorry." Hey, Sebastian read the note 3 times before his hands started shaking. She'd left. The one person who'd made any of this worth it had walked away. And the worst part was that she was right. He'd been so focused on fighting his family, on proving he could make his own choices, that he'd forgotten to ask what those choices were actually for. Who was Sebastian Ravenshire without the title, without the estate, without the family name? He had no idea. He'd traded one cage for another. Rebellion was still reaction, still letting his mother define his identity by opposing her. He'd never actually figured out who he was beneath it all. Sebastian sat on the floor of the empty flat and felt the last pieces of his carefully constructed rebellion fall apart around him. Tomorrow, his mother would respond to his ultimatum. Tomorrow, he'd have to decide whether winning meant using the same cruel weapons that had been used against him. Tomorrow, he'd have to figure out if any of this had been worth it. But tonight he was just a man sitting alone in a rented flat, holding a letter from a woman who'd loved him enough to leave, and wondering if he'd ever actually been brave at all, or if he'd just been running from one prison into another, calling it freedom because it felt different. The phone rang. It was Gerald. Your mother wants to meet, the solicitor said. Tomorrow. She says she has a proposal. What kind of proposal? I don't know. But Sebastian, she sounded different, almost defeated. Set it up. He hung up and looked around the empty flat one more time. Then he pulled out his phone and texted Amelia. I understand why you left, and you're right. I need to figure out who I am, but I'm not giving up on us. When I do figure it out, I'm coming to find you. He didn't expect a response. He got one anyway, 3 hours later. Then you'd better make sure it's worth finding. Sebastian read those words over and over in the darkness, and for the first time since all this began, he felt something shift inside him. Not rebellion, not obedience, something else entirely. The beginning of actual choice. The meeting was set for 9 a.m. in the Ravenshire Estate's formal boardroom, a space designed to intimidate with its oak paneling and portraits of dead ancestors staring down in judgment. Sebastian arrived 15 minutes early and found his mother already there, standing at the window with her back to the door. She looked smaller than he remembered, older, the weight of everything that had happened between them visible in the slope of her shoulders. You came, Eleanor said without turning around. You asked me to. I wasn't certain you would, after everything. Sebastian moved into the room but didn't sit. The folder with her financial indiscretions sat in his briefcase, a weapon he still wasn't sure he could bring himself to use, because using it would mean becoming exactly what he'd spent weeks fighting against. It would mean choosing power over principle, victory over values. And somewhere in Manchester, Amelia would know. She'd see the news, read about how he'd blackmailed his own mother, and understand that he'd learned nothing at all. You said you had a proposal, Sebastian said. Eleanor finally turned to face him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying, which was impossible because Eleanor Ravenshire didn't cry. She commanded, she controlled, she conquered, but she didn't break. I've been thinking about what you said, she began quietly, about what I gave up, what I buried, and you were right. His mother moved to the table, her hands gripping the back of a chair like she needed it for support. I was 24 when I married your father, younger than you are now. I was studying art history at Cambridge. I wanted to work in museums, to spend my life around beautiful things that mattered. Sebastian had never heard this story. His mother's life had always seemed to begin the day she became a Ravenshire, as if nothing before that moment had existed. What happened? What always happens. Eleanor's smile was bitter. My father arranged the marriage. Your father's family needed legitimacy, someone with aristocratic blood to clean up their nouveau riche reputation. My family needed money. I was the transaction that satisfied both needs. Did you love him? I barely knew him, but I thought I could learn to love him, that duty and affection could coexist. She sat down heavily. I was wrong. The confession hung in the air between them, raw and unexpected. Your father was a good man in many ways, Eleanor continued. Kind, well-meaning, completely useless at managing anything. Within 5 years, he'd nearly bankrupted the estate through careless investments and generous loans to friends who never paid him back. So you took over. Someone had to. She met his eyes. And I was good at it, Sebastian. Better than good. I had a mind for numbers, for strategy, for seeing 3 moves ahead. I saved this family from ruin. I built us into what we are today. At what cost? Everything. My dreams, my interests, the person I might have been. She paused. And eventually, your father. He couldn't stand being overshadowed by his own wife, started drinking, started disappearing for days at a time. By the end, we were strangers living in the same house. Sebastian thought about his father, about the distant figure who died when he was 16. He'd always assumed his parents had been united, a team. He'd never considered that his mother might have been as trapped as he felt now. Why are you telling me this? Because I see myself in you. Eleanor's voice cracked. The same desperation. The same belief that love might actually be worth the sacrifice. And I wanted to warn you that it's not. That 30 years from now, you'll be sitting where I am, realizing you threw away everything for a feeling that doesn't last. Sebastian sat down across from her. Or maybe, he said quietly, 30 years from now, I'll be glad I chose to be happy instead of powerful. They can't coexist. Not in our world. Then maybe our world is wrong. Eleanor laughed, sharp and pained. Of course it's wrong. It's brutal and unfair and built on the suffering of people like us who sacrifice everything to maintain it. But it's the world we have, and changing it requires more than individual rebellion. It requires dismantling everything. Then let's dismantle it. His mother stared at him. You can't be serious. Sebastian leaned forward, an idea crystallizing that had been forming since Amelia left, since he'd sat alone in that empty flat and realized he'd been fighting the wrong battle. What if we restructured the estate, he said. What if instead of maintaining this feudal system where one family controls everything, we turned it into something else? A foundation, a trust, something that actually serves people instead of just accumulating power. That's insane. Is it? We have resources, property, influence. What if we used it to create opportunities instead of just protecting legacy? The board would never allow it. Then we replaced the board. Eleanor was shaking her head, but Sebastian could see something shifting in her expression. Not agreement, but curiosity, the first crack in her certainty. Even if we could do that, she said, and I'm not saying we can, what about the Ashfords? The Carlton Club? All the alliances we've lost? Let them go. We build new ones, with people who actually care about doing something meaningful instead of just maintaining status. And your girl, your street musician? Her name is Amelia, and she's not mine. She's her own person who deserves better than being the prize in a family war. Eleanor studied him for a long moment. You've changed, she said finally. A month ago you were running away from responsibility. Now you're trying to reinvent it. Because I finally understand what responsibility actually means. It's not about protecting dead men's legacies. It's about making choices that matter, about being accountable for the impact we have. His mother stood up and walked to the window again, staring out at grounds that had been in the Ravenshire family for 12 generations. If we do this, she said quietly, if we actually try to change things, it will destroy us. The aristocracy will turn on us. We'll lose our social standing. Everything we've been will be gone. Good. Maybe it's time for something new. Eleanor turned back to him, and for the first time in his life, Sebastian saw his mother smile with something that looked like pride. You're either the bravest person I've ever met, she said, or the most foolish. Probably both. She crossed to him and did something she hadn't done since he was a child. She put her hand on his shoulder. Your father would have loved this plan, she said. He was always too idealistic for his own good, too. Is that a yes? It's a maybe. Eleanor's grip tightened. But Sebastian, if we do this, there's no going back. We'll be declaring war on everything our family has been. Are you prepared for that? He thought about Amelia in Manchester, trying to rebuild her life away from the chaos he'd brought her. He thought about his sister Arabella, trapped in the same cycle. He thought about all the people who'd spent their lives maintaining a system that served no one but itself. I'm prepared. Then we need to move quickly. His mother pulled out her phone. I'll call an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. We present the restructuring plan before anyone has time to organize opposition. What about the folder? The evidence? Sebastian pulled it from his briefcase and handed it to her. Burn it, he said. I'm not winning by destroying you. We either do this together or not at all. Eleanor took the folder with shaking hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We might both regret this. Probably. She smiled grimly. But at least we'll regret it honestly. The emergency board meeting was a bloodbath. Sebastian and Eleanor presented their plan to restructure the Ravenshire estate into a charitable foundation, maintaining family involvement but distributing actual control to an independent board of trustees focused on arts education, music programs, and support for young artists. The reaction was immediate and visceral. This is insanity, Lord Hartwell declared, half standing from his chair. You're proposing to give away 300 years of accumulated wealth and power? We're proposing to use it for something meaningful, Eleanor countered, something beyond just maintaining our own comfort. Another board member, Lady Whitmore, shook her head in disbelief. Do you have any idea what this will do to our standing? The other families will see this as weakness. Capitulation. Let them, Sebastian said. We're not asking for permission. We're informing you of the change. You can't do this without board approval. Actually, Eleanor said calmly, as controlling trustee, I can. The board serves in an advisory capacity, Final decisions rest with the family. The room erupted in shouting, accusations of betrayal, threats of legal action, promises to contact other families, to organize opposition. Sebastian watched it unfold and felt strangely calm. This was the death rattle of an old system, and death was never quiet or dignified. Lord Hartwell was the last to speak, his voice cutting through the chaos. "If you do this," he said directly to Sebastian, "you'll be destroying everything your ancestors built, every sacrifice they made, every strategic decision that brought the Ravenshire name to prominence. All of it, gone." "My ancestors," Sebastian replied, "built their prominence on the backs of tenant farmers and coal miners. They accumulated wealth through exploitation and maintained power through strategic marriages that treated children like trading cards. If that's the legacy I'm destroying, then good riddance. You're a fool." "Maybe. But I'd rather be a fool trying to do something good than a success at maintaining something rotten." The board members filed out one by one, some in fury, some in resignation. Within an hour, Sebastian knew, the news would spread through London's elite circles. The Ravenshires had betrayed their class. They'd chosen principle over power. There would be consequences. When the room finally emptied, only Sebastian, Eleanor, and Gerald remained. "Well," the solicitor said dryly, "that went about as well as could be expected." "How long before the legal challenges start?" Eleanor asked. "I'd estimate 48 hours. Maybe less." Gerald pulled out a tablet. "They'll argue you're acting against the estate's interests. Try to have you removed as trustee. Can they succeed?" "Possibly. It depends on how many allies we can rally." Sebastian's phone buzzed. A text from Arabella. "What the hell are you doing? Mother just called me screaming about destroying the family. Please tell me you haven't lost your mind." He typed back, "Come to the estate. I'll explain everything." Her response was immediate. "On my way. This better be good." Eleanor was staring at her own phone, her face pale. "The Ashfords just released a statement," she said. "They're condemning our decision and cutting all remaining ties." She looked up. "This is really happening, isn't it? We're actually burning it all down." "Not burning it down. Rebuilding it into something better." His mother's laugh was shaky. "When did you become so certain?" "When I realized that the only thing worse than failing is not trying at all." Warwick. Arabella arrived 2 hours later, storming into the library where Sebastian sat reviewing legal documents with Gerald. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she demanded without preamble. "Hello to you too." "Don't joke." She threw herself into a chair. "I just spent the last hour on the phone with Lady Ashford, who informed me that our family is now persona non grata in every social circle that matters. We're outcasts, Sebastian. Pariahs." "Good." "Good?" She stared at him. "How is any of this good?" "Because it means we're free." Sebastian set down his papers. "Free to actually choose who we want to be instead of playing roles written by dead people." "That's easy for you to say. You found someone worth burning bridges for." "What about me? What am I supposed to do now that my entire future has been torched?" "Build a new one you actually want." Arabella's fury crumbled into something more vulnerable. "I don't know what I want," she admitted quietly. "I've spent my whole life being told what to want, who to marry, how to behave, what to care about. Then this is your chance to figure it out." She looked at him with wet eyes. "I'm scared." "Me too." His sister laughed despite her tears. "At least you have your musician." "Where is she anyway?" "Manchester. She left." Arabella blinked. "What?" "She left because she realized I was fighting my family instead of fighting for myself. That I was using her as an excuse to rebel without actually knowing what I was rebelling toward." "So you did all this, blew up the entire family structure for a woman who's not even here?" "I did this because it was right. Because someone had to." They sat in silence for a moment. "You're insane," Arabella finally said, but also kind of brave. She stood up. "So what do you need me to do?" "Help me. Help us. We're going to need allies when the real fight starts. I'm 22 and know exactly nothing about fighting aristocratic power structures. Then learn. We all are." His sister considered this, then nodded slowly. "Okay, but on one condition." "What?" "When this is over, when we've either succeeded or crashed and burned, you go to Manchester and get your girl back. Deal." The counterattack came faster than expected. By the next morning, a coalition of aristocratic families had filed an injunction to freeze all Ravenshire assets pending a full legal review. They argued that Eleanor and Sebastian were acting irrationally, potentially under duress or mental impairment, and that the proposed restructuring violated fiduciary duty to the estate. The case was assigned to a judge known for conservative rulings and deference to traditional family structures. "We're going to lose," Gerald said, reviewing the filings, "unless we can demonstrate overwhelming public support or prove that the restructuring is in the estate's best interests." Sebastian was staring at his phone, rereading Amelia's last text for the 100th time. "Then you'd better make sure it's worth finding." "What if we went public?" he said suddenly. Gerald looked up. "I'm sorry?" "What if we took this directly to the people? Held a press conference? Explained what we're trying to do and why? That's incredibly risky. The press has not been kind to you, because I've been hiding, running." "What if I stopped?" Eleanor entered the room, catching the end of the conversation. "What are you proposing?" she asked. "A press conference. Tomorrow. We lay out the whole plan, the restructuring, the foundation, everything we're trying to build." "They'll crucify you," his mother said flatly. "They'll bring up Amelia. The scandal. Your fitness to make decisions. Let them. I'll answer every question honestly." Eleanor and Gerald exchanged glances. This could backfire spectacularly, the solicitor warned. Or it could work. Sebastian stood up, feeling something crystallize inside him. "We've been playing by their rules this entire time. Maybe it's time to write new ones." His mother studied him for a long moment. "Your father once tried something similar," she said quietly. "Wanted to open parts of the estate to the public, hold concerts and art exhibitions. The family shut him down so fast he never brought it up again." "What if he'd fought harder?" "Then maybe things would have been different." Eleanor straightened her shoulders. "All right, we do the press conference, but we do it right. Full transparency. No hiding, no excuses. When? Tomorrow morning. 10 a.m. Eleanor pulled out her phone. "I'll contact every major outlet. If we're going to burn, we might as well make it spectacular." Sebastian spent the night writing and rewriting his statement. Every word mattered. Every phrase would be dissected, analyzed, weaponized against him. At 3 a.m., his phone rang. Unknown number. Against his better judgment, he answered. "Sebastian?" The voice punched through him like a fist to the chest. "Amelia." "I saw the news," she said. "About the restructuring, about the legal battle." "You're following?" "Hard not to. It's everywhere." She paused. "What are you doing?" "Trying to build something that matters." "By destroying your entire life?" "My life was already destroyed. I'm just clearing the rubble." Amelia laughed softly, and the sound made his chest ache. "That's very poetic for 3 a.m. "I haven't slept." "Me neither." Another pause. "Are you doing this for me?" Sebastian considered lying, then remembered that lies were what got them here in the first place. "Partly," he admitted, "but mostly for me, for my sister, for everyone who's been trapped in systems that serve no one." "That's a better answer. I'm doing a press conference tomorrow. Going to explain everything. It'll probably be a disaster." "Probably," Amelia agreed. "But at least it'll be an honest disaster." "Will you watch?" "Maybe." She hesitated. "Sebastian, what happens after? If you win, if you actually pull this off, what then?" "Then I come find you, if you'll let me." "I don't know if I will. I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not caught in your chaos." "I understand. But," Amelia's voice softened, "I hope you win. Not because of us, just because someone should. Someone should prove that choosing differently is possible. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've actually survived tomorrow." She hung up, and Sebastian sat holding the phone, feeling like he could breathe for the first time in days. The press conference was held in the Ravenshire Estate's main hall, a room that had hosted kings and prime ministers. Now it was filled with journalists and cameras, all pointed at the small podium where Sebastian stood with his mother beside him. The questions started immediately, shouted over each other in a chaos of voices. "Is it true you're giving away the family fortune? What about the legal challenges? Where is Amelia Hart? Sebastian held up a hand, and somehow, miraculously, the room quieted. "I'll answer all your questions," he said. "But first, let me tell you a story." He talked for 20 minutes without notes, about growing up trapped in a life chosen for him, about meeting Amelia and understanding what freedom felt like, about realizing that power without purpose was just elaborate slavery, about his mother's sacrifices and his father's failures, and the weight of legacy that crushed everyone it touched. "The Ravenshire estate is worth approximately £800 million, he said. "That wealth was accumulated over 3 centuries through land ownership, strategic marriages, and yes, exploitation of people who had no choice but to serve. We can't change how that wealth was created, but we can change what it's used for." He laid out the restructuring plan in detail: the foundation, the arts programs, the commitment to supporting young musicians and artists who, like Amelia, were trying to build lives on nothing but talent and determination. "Some of you will say this is naive," Sebastian continued, "that we're throwing away power that could be used more strategically. And maybe you're right, but I'd rather fail at trying to do something good than succeed at maintaining something corrupt." The questions came fast after that. "What about Amelia Hart?" a reporter from the Times asked. "Is this restructuring just an elaborate apology?" "No. This is bigger than my personal life. But yes, knowing Amelia showed me what authentic living looks like, showed me that building something from nothing takes more courage than maintaining something inherited." Another journalist? "Your own family members have called you mentally unfit. How do you respond?" Sebastian glanced at his mother, who stepped forward to the microphone. "I was one of those family members," Eleanor said. "And I was wrong. My son isn't mentally unfit, he's morally brave, which in our world often looks like insanity because we've become so comfortable with moral cowardice." The room went silent. "I've spent 30 years protecting power," Eleanor continued, her voice shaking slightly. 30 years choosing legacy over love, duty over honesty, control over connection. And it made me into someone I don't recognize anymore. Someone hard and afraid and alone." She looked at Sebastian. "My son is trying to save me from that fate, and maybe save all of us from a system that demands we sacrifice our humanity to maintain our status." A reporter from The Guardian stood up. "What if you lose? What if the courts rule against you?" "Then we lose," Sebastian said simply. "But at least we'll lose fighting for something worth fighting for." The press conference lasted 2 more hours. By the end, Sebastian was exhausted, wrung out, but strangely light. They'd told the truth. All of it. Now they just had to wait to see if truth mattered at all. The reaction was immediate and polarizing. Conservative outlets condemned them as traitors to their class. Progressive papers hailed them as revolutionaries. Social media exploded with debate about privilege, responsibility, and whether genuine change was possible from within power structures. But the most important response came 3 days later. The judge, reviewing the injunction, called all parties into chambers. Sebastian and Eleanor sat on one side with Gerald. The coalition of aristocratic families sat on the other with their battalion of lawyers. "I've reviewed the filings," the judge said, "and I've watched the press conference." He looked directly at Sebastian. "I've also done something unusual. I've spoken to people who work on the Ravenshire estate. Gardeners, housekeepers, maintenance staff." The coalition lawyers shifted uncomfortably. "And do you know what they told me? That in 30 years of employment, no one from the family had ever asked their names, never asked about their families or their lives. They were invisible." He turned to the coalition. "You're arguing that this restructuring violates fiduciary duty. But duty to whom? To preserve wealth for wealth's sake? To maintain power that serves no one but itself?" "Your Honor," one of the lawyers began, but the judge held up a hand. "I'm not finished." He looked back at Sebastian and Eleanor. "What you're proposing is radical, possibly naive. It may fail spectacularly, but it's not illegal, and it's not evidence of mental incompetence." He closed the folder in front of him. "The injunction is denied. The Ravenshire family has the right to restructure their holdings as they see fit. This court will not interfere with a good faith effort to use private wealth for public benefit." The gavel came down, and Sebastian felt his mother's hand find his under the table. They'd won, not the war, but this battle. The coalition filed out in furious silence while Gerald was already on his phone coordinating the next steps. Eleanor turned to Sebastian. "What now?" she asked. "Now," he said. "I go to Manchester. To find your girl? To find out if she'll still have me." His mother smiled. "Then go. I can handle the rest of this. You've done your part. We've done our part. Together." Eleanor pulled him into a hug, surprising them both. "Thank you," she whispered, "for saving me from myself. Thank you for letting me try." He left the courthouse and headed directly to the train station, not bothering to change clothes or pack a bag. On the train north, his phone exploded with messages. Arabella, "You did it!" Gerald, "We need to discuss implementation timeline. Unknown numbers from press wanting interviews." And one from Amelia. "I watched the ruling. Now what?" Sebastian typed back, "Now I get on my knees and beg you to give me another chance." Her response took 5 agonizing minutes. "I'm at the old rehearsal space on Chapel Street. You have 1 hour before I leave for a gig in Glasgow." He arrived in Manchester with 40 minutes to spare, running through rain-slicked streets, his expensive suit soaked through and ruined. The rehearsal space was in a converted warehouse, and he could hear her voice before he even opened the door. She was singing the same song she'd been singing that first night in Regent Street, and it hit him just as hard now as it had then. He waited until she finished, until the last note faded into silence, before he spoke. "Hi." Amelia turned and her expression was unreadable. "You came. You gave me an hour. I had 40 minutes left. You look terrible." "I ran from the train station. In a suit?" It seemed important. She set down her guitar and crossed her arms. "So, you won your war, restructured your entire family legacy, became a revolutionary aristocrat. And now you're here. Now I'm here. Why?" Sebastian took a breath, and for once the words came easily. "Because I love you. Not because you saved me or represented freedom or any of the symbolic things I convinced myself you were, but because you're brave and talented and you see through my bullshit, because you make me want to be better, because you left when I needed you to, even though it hurt us both." Amelia's eyes were wet. "That's a good speech. It's the truth. Truth is easy when you've already won everything else." "I haven't won anything," Sebastian said. "I've dismantled my entire life. I have no idea what comes next. I'm probably going to fail at running a foundation. The aristocracy hates me. My family is barely speaking to me. And the woman I love is about to leave for Glasgow." He stepped closer. "But I know who I am now. Not the Duke, not a Ravenshire. Just Sebastian, a man trying to build something meaningful. And I'm asking if you want to build it with me." Amelia stared at him for a long moment. Then she started laughing. "You're insane," she said. "Completely insane. I know. You've destroyed your entire world for a chance at this. I know. And you still might fail. We might fail. I know." She crossed the space between them and grabbed his soaking wet lapels. "Good. Because I don't want someone who has all the answers. I want someone who's willing to figure them out with me." Their kiss tasted like rain and possibility and the reckless courage of two people choosing each other despite every reasonable objection. When they finally pulled apart, Amelia was grinning. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now," Sebastian said, "we do the terrifying work of actually being happy. And the foundation? We build it together. You run the music programs. I handle the bureaucracy. We figure it out as we go. That sounds like a disaster waiting to happen. Probably. But at least it'll be our disaster." Amelia pulled him close again. "I have a gig in Glasgow tonight," she said. 6-hour drive. Want to come?" "More than anything. Then grab your coat." She paused. "Oh, wait, you don't have a coat. Just a ruined suit. I'll survive." They walked out of the rehearsal space into the Manchester rain, hand in hand, and Sebastian felt the weight of 3 centuries of Ravenshire legacy finally lift from his shoulders. Behind them, the old world was burning. Ahead, something new was waiting to be built. And for the first time in his life, Duke Sebastian Ravenshire was exactly where he wanted to be. The drive to Glasgow happened through rain that never stopped, droplets hammering the windshield like judgment from a sky that had no mercy left to give. Amelia drove while Sebastian sat in the passenger seat of her ancient Volkswagen, watching streetlights blur past and thinking about how strange it was that the most important moments of transformation happened in the smallest spaces. A car, a cafe, a rehearsal room, never in the grand halls where power was supposed to live. They didn't talk much during those 6 hours. Sometimes silence carries more weight than words, and what existed between them now was too fragile and too precious to risk shattering with premature declarations. But her hand found his somewhere past Carlisle, fingers threading together in a grip that said everything language couldn't. The venue in Glasgow was a basement club that smelled like beer and sweat and the particular desperation of artists trying to make rent through their craft. Sebastian had never been anywhere like it. In his former life, culture meant box seats at the Royal Opera House and charity galas where art was consumed like expensive wine, appreciated but never truly felt. This was different. This was raw. Amelia performed with 3 other musicians, people she'd known for years, and Sebastian watched from a corner table while she became someone else on stage. Not the woman who'd walked away from him, not the girl singing in the cold for coins, but something larger, something that transcended the small room and the sparse crowd. She was an artist in the truest sense, and he realized with a sharp clarity that cut like glass that he'd almost destroyed this. Almost pulled her into his world, where everything authentic got crushed beneath the weight of expectation. When the set ended, she found him in the corner. "What did you think?" "I think I've been a fool." Amelia sat down, still breathing hard from the performance. "That's not a review. I'm serious." Sebastian looked at her, really looked at her. "I've spent weeks thinking about what I was fighting for. Freedom, love, choice. But I never asked what you were fighting for, what you were giving up by being with me." She was quiet for a moment, then signaled the bartender for 2 whiskeys. "You want the truth?" she asked when the drinks arrived. "Always. Being with you terrified me. Not because of the press or the scandal or even your family." She took a drink. "Because it would have been so easy to let you save me, to stop fighting and just become the musician you funded through your foundation, to trade my struggle for your protection. That's not what I wanted." "I know, but that's what would have happened anyway. Because poverty is exhausting, Sebastian, and when someone offers you a way out, it takes everything you have to refuse. So you ran. I survived." There's a difference. The words hit him harder than any accusation could have because they carried no anger, just the brutal honesty of someone who'd learned early that survival and comfort were rarely the same thing. "What changed?" he asked. "Why did you let me come to Manchester?" Amelia smiled, sad and knowing. "Because I watched your press conference. Watched you burn down everything you were supposed to be, not for me, but because it was right. And I realized you weren't trying to save me anymore. You were trying to save yourself." "Am I doing a good job? You're still here, aren't you? In Glasgow in a dive bar instead of some palace drinking wine that costs more than my monthly rent." "I'd say you're making progress." Sebastian laughed despite himself. The sound felt foreign in his throat, like his body had forgotten how to express joy without calculation. They sat together while the next band set up, and Sebastian felt something shift inside him. Not the dramatic transformation he'd expected, not some cinematic moment of clarity, just a quiet recognition that becoming someone new meant letting go of who you'd been, piece by piece, until only the essential parts remained. They stayed in Glasgow for 3 days. Amelia had 2 more gigs lined up, small venues that paid barely enough to cover expenses. Sebastian helped her carry equipment, set up microphones, navigate the particular chaos of small-time touring. He was terrible at it. His hands, accustomed to signing documents and shaking hands at charity events, struggled with cables and amps. He dropped things. He got in the way. At one point, a sound engineer actually shoved him aside with a muttered curse about useless rich boys who thought they were helping. Amelia found it hilarious. "You're the worst roadie I've ever had," she said, watching him fumble with a speaker stand. "I'm trying." "I know. That's the funny part." But there was affection in her mockery, and Sebastian discovered that being bad at something felt strangely liberating. His entire life had been about competence, about performing his role flawlessly. Being allowed to fail without consequence was a gift he hadn't known he needed. On the 3rd night, after her final set, they walked along the River Clyde. The city lights reflected in dark water, and somewhere in the distance someone was playing bagpipes badly. "I have to go back to London tomorrow," Sebastian said. "The foundation. There's work to do." "I know. Come with me." Amelia stopped walking. Sebastian, not to live in the estate, not to be the Duke's girlfriend or any of that bullshit, just to help build this thing. You know music. You know what struggling artists need. The foundation should be run by people who've actually lived that struggle. And what happens when the press finds out? When they start calling me your kept woman, or whatever cruel thing they come up with? Let them. We tell the truth. You're the foundation's director of music programs. You're qualified. You're passionate. And yes, we're together. Those things can coexist. She looked out at the water, and Sebastian could see her wrestling with it. The same terror she'd described. The fear that accepting would mean surrendering something essential about herself. I can't just be your girlfriend who happens to run a program, she said finally. If I do this, I need real authority, real control, not Sebastian Ravenshire's charity project. Done. You report to the board, not to me. We keep our relationship and our work separate. Can we actually do that? I don't know, but I want to try. Amelia turned to face him, and in the reflected light from the river, she looked both younger and older than her years. If I say yes, if I come back to London with you, I need you to understand something. I'm not going to change who I am. I'm still going to perform in dive bars. I'm still going to fight with you when you're being an aristocratic idiot. I'm still going to put my music first. Good. I wouldn't want you any other way, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then. She kissed him, and it tasted like whiskey and river wind and the reckless promise of two people choosing each other despite every rational reason to protect themselves. Okay, she said, I'll come back to London, but I'm keeping my flat in Manchester, somewhere to run when you inevitably drive me crazy. Deal. Okay. London greeted them with headlines that ranged from supportive to savage. The Guardian ran a piece titled, "The Ravensshire Revolution. Can Aristocratic Wealth Fund Real Change?" The Daily Mail countered with Duke's Folly, how Sebastian Ravensshire is destroying British heritage. Sebastian stopped reading after the first dozen articles. Eleanor had been busy in his absence. She'd assembled a preliminary board for the foundation, a mix of arts administrators, educators, and musicians from backgrounds that had nothing to do with aristocracy. The Ravensshire estate itself was being restructured, with most of the family quarters converted into office space and artist residencies. The first board meeting happened in what used to be the Blue Drawing Room, where Sebastian had stood 3 months ago contemplating his impending engagement to Victoria Ashford. Now it was filled with people in jeans and practical shoes, arguing passionately about grant criteria and application processes. Amelia sat at the table as the newly appointed director of music programs, presenting her vision for supporting emerging artists. She was brilliant and fierce, and Sebastian watched her command the room with the same intensity she brought to her performances. His mother caught his eye from across the table and smiled. After the meeting, Eleanor pulled him aside. "She's extraordinary," his mother said. "I know. Does she terrify you constantly?" "Good." Eleanor's expression softened. "Your father terrified me. Not in a bad way. In the way that matters. He saw through all my carefully constructed armor and loved what he found underneath. I never appreciated that while he was alive. Do you regret it? The way things were between you?" "Every day." Eleanor looked out the window at grounds that no longer belonged exclusively to the family. "But I'm trying to do better now. To build something he would have been proud of. He would be. I know I am." His mother's eyes filled, and she pulled him into a brief, fierce hug before composing herself and walking away. The first 6 months of the foundation's operation were chaos barely contained by good intentions. There were budget crises and staff conflicts and moments when Sebastian was certain the entire experiment would collapse under the weight of its own ambition. But slowly, impossibly, it started to work. The first round of grants went to 40 young artists across Britain, musicians like Amelia who were talented but struggling, dancers and painters and poets who just needed a chance. The foundation covered rent and equipment and training, asking nothing in return except that recipients help others when they could. Stories started filtering back. A violinist who'd been sleeping in her car got into a prestigious conservatory. A hip-hop artist from Birmingham released an album that went platinum. A playwright saw her work performed at the National Theatre. Small victories that added up to something larger than Sebastian had imagined possible. Arabella joined the foundation staff 6 months in, taking charge of development and fundraising. She was ruthless and brilliant, weaponizing her aristocratic connections to extract donations from people who'd ostracized the family months earlier. "You're terrifying," Sebastian told her after she secured a £1 million commitment from a banking executive. "I learned from Mother," she said with a grin, "but I'm using my powers for good now. What about you? Any thoughts on your own future?" Arabella shrugged. "I'm 23. I figure I have time to figure out who I am beyond being a Ravenshire. That's more self-awareness than I had at your age. You were a disaster at my age. Still am, just a more purposeful disaster." Eat. Sebastian and Amelia's relationship settled into something that looked almost normal, if you ignored the constant press attention and occasional death threats from aristocratic purists. They lived primarily in the converted estate quarters, but kept Amelia's Manchester flat and the small Hackney place as refuges. They fought regularly, usually about money or boundaries or Sebastian's tendency to slip back into aristocratic assumptions about how things should work. But they fought honestly, without the careful diplomacy that had characterized every relationship in his old life. One night, after a particularly brutal argument about whether the foundation should accept funding from a corporation with questionable labor practices, Amelia threw a book at him. "You're being an elitist prick," she said. "I'm trying to maintain ethical standards." "No, you're trying to maintain purity, which is a luxury poor people can't afford. That corporation's money could fund 20 artists for a year and compromise everything we're trying to build. What we're trying to build is support for actual living artists, not some perfect vision that helps no one because we're too precious to get our hands dirty." The book had been a collection of poetry, and it had left a small bruise on his shoulder. Sebastian picked it up and read the spine. "You threw Neruda at me," he observed. "I thought about throwing the lamp, but figured that would be harder to explain." They stared at each other for a moment, then both started laughing. "We're insane," Sebastian said. "Completely." Amelia crossed to him. "But at least we're honest about it." They took the corporation's money with strict conditions about how it could be used. It wasn't perfect. But perfect, Sebastian was learning, was the enemy of good enough. 8. The real test came 18 months after the foundation launched. Lord Ashford, Victoria's father, requested a meeting. Sebastian almost refused, but Eleanor convinced him to listen. They met at a neutral location, a cafe in Kensington that was too public for scandal and too mundane for significance. Lord Ashford looked older than Sebastian remembered. The year had not been kind to the Ashford family. Their financial manipulations had been exposed in the press, and several board positions had been lost. "I owe you an apology," the older man said without preamble. Sebastian said nothing, just waited. "I thought you were throwing your life away, that you were mentally unstable or having some kind of breakdown." Lord Ashford stirred his coffee mechanically. "But I've watched what you've built, the foundation, the artists you've supported, and I realize I was wrong." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because my daughter asked me to," Sebastian blinked. "Victoria?" "She's been following the foundation's work. She wants to contribute. Specifically, she wants to fund a program for young women in the arts." The offer caught Sebastian completely off guard. "Why?" Lord Ashford smiled sadly. "Because she's been where you were, trapped in a life chosen for her, and watching you break free gave her permission to imagine something different." "What did she do?" "Ended her engagement to the man we'd selected, enrolled in university to study art history. She's living in a small flat in Bloomsbury and working part-time at a gallery. Good for her. She wanted me to tell you thank you for showing her that rebellion was possible. Tell her she doesn't owe me anything, but if she wants to support the foundation, we'd be honored." Lord Ashford stood to leave, then paused. "I was cruel to you, to both of you. I treated human beings like chess pieces, and I'm sorry." Sebastian watched the man walk away and felt something he hadn't expected. Not triumph, not vindication, just sadness for all the years people spent trapped in systems they'd built themselves. 2 years after the foundation launched, Sebastian stood in the same concert hall where he'd first seen Amelia perform publicly after they'd reunited. But this wasn't a small underground venue anymore. This was Royal Festival Hall, and Amelia was the headliner. The show was a fundraiser for the foundation, and every seat was filled. Sebastian sat in the back row, refusing the VIP treatment, watching as she commanded a stage that would have been unthinkable 3 years ago. She sang old songs and new ones, songs about struggle and survival, and the strange journey from street corners to concert halls. And when she introduced the final number, she looked directly at where Sebastian sat. "This last song is about second chances," she said to the audience, "about choosing love over safety, about the terrifying work of actually being happy." The song was new, something she'd written but never performed publicly. It was about a woman who meets a man who's drowning in silk and champagne, who doesn't recognize himself in mirrors anymore, about how they save each other not through grand gestures but through small acts of honesty. Sebastian felt tears on his face and didn't bother wiping them away. When the show ended and the applause finally faded, he found her backstage in the controlled chaos of performers and crew. "You were extraordinary," he said. "I know," she grinned. "How does it feel dating someone more successful than you?" "Terrifying and wonderful." Good answer. They stood in the wings while people rushed around them, and Sebastian marveled at how far they'd come from that frozen December night in Regent Street. "Marry me," he said suddenly. Amelia froze. "What? Not because of duty or expectation, or because we're supposed to, just because I want to spend my life with you, arguing and creating and building this strange, imperfect thing we've made." She stared at him. "You're serious?" "Completely. You know this will cause another media circus. Probably. And your family will have opinions, definitely. And I'm not changing my name. I'm not becoming the Duchess of anything. I wouldn't ask you to." Amelia pulled him close, and her eyes were bright with tears. "Then, yes, you idiot. Yes." They kissed while stage crew worked around them, and someone yelled at them to move, and Sebastian had never been happier in his entire life. They were married 6 months later in the gardens of the Ravenshire estate, which was no longer exclusively theirs, but still held enough meaning to matter. The ceremony was small, immediate family and close friends, with Amelia's musician colleagues providing entertainment that ranged from classical to punk rock. Eleanor walked Sebastian down the aisle, a reversal of tradition that felt appropriate given everything they'd rebuilt together. When it was his turn to speak his vows, Sebastian abandoned the carefully written words he'd prepared and spoke from the heart. "I spent my whole life being told who I was supposed to be, and then you showed me who I could choose to be. You didn't save me, you challenged me. You demanded I become someone worth knowing, and every day since I've been trying to live up to that challenge." Amelia's vows were simpler. "You're still an aristocratic idiot sometimes," she said, and the guests laughed. "But you're my aristocratic idiot. And I promise to keep calling you out when you're being ridiculous, to support you when you're being brave, and to love you through all the messy, complicated parts of actually building a life together." They exchanged rings that cost nothing close to what Sebastian's family jewels were worth. Simple silver bands that Amelia had designed herself. Victoria Ashford attended the wedding with her girlfriend, a painter from South London who had no aristocratic connections whatsoever. She hugged Sebastian at the reception. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For what?" "For showing me it was possible. You did the hard part yourself." "Maybe. But you went first. That matters." Arabella got drunk at the reception and gave a toast that made everyone simultaneously laugh and cry, talking about her brother who'd been dying inside expensive suits until he'd been brave enough to choose life over legacy. Their mother sat at the family table, watching the celebration with an expression Sebastian couldn't quite read. When he asked her later what she was thinking, Eleanor smiled. "I was thinking about your father. How much he would have loved this. All these different kinds of people together, celebrating something real. Do you think he'd be proud?" Eleanor touched his face gently. "I think he'd be grateful that you found the courage he never could." 5 years after Sebastian first heard Amelia sing in Regent Street, he sat in the Foundation's main office reviewing grant applications. The work had become routine in the best possible way. No longer a revolutionary experiment, but an established institution that supported hundreds of artists annually. The Ravenshire estate itself had transformed completely. Most of the grounds were now public gardens, where local families came for picnics. The Great Hall hosted concerts and exhibitions. Artist residencies filled rooms that had once housed aristocratic excess. Sebastian's role had evolved too. He was no longer the Duke trying to prove something, just a man doing work that mattered, making decisions that affected real lives in tangible ways. Amelia found him staring out the window at the gardens. "You have that look again," she said. "What look?" "The one where you're thinking too hard about meaning and purpose. Guilty." She settled into his lap, which was unprofessional given that they were technically at work, but some rules were worth breaking. "What are you thinking about?" "How strange it is that the best decision I ever made started with complete destruction. How I had to burn down everything I was to discover who I could be." Amelia traced the line of his jaw. "You know what I think?" "Tell me." "I think you're still figuring it out. We both are, and that's okay. Being happy isn't a destination you reach. It's a practice you commit to. Even when it's hard, especially then." They sat together in the afternoon light filtering through windows that had once symbolized isolation, but now opened onto something larger. Outside, an artist in residence was setting up for a painting class with local children. Music drifted from somewhere in the converted East Wing. Sebastian thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago, lost and suffocating and certain that his life was already over. He thought about Amelia standing in the cold, singing to strangers, building a life one performance at a time. They'd both been so alone in their separate struggles. And now they weren't. "I love you," he said. "I know." She kissed him. "Now finish those grant applications. Some of us have actual work to do." She left him in the office, and Sebastian returned to the applications with renewed focus. Each one represented a person trying to create something meaningful against impossible odds. People who reminded him why the destruction had been necessary. You couldn't build something new on a rotten foundation. Sometimes you had to tear it all down and start from nothing. Bosset. That evening, Sebastian and Amelia hosted a dinner for the foundation board. Eleanor was there, along with Arabella, and Gerald the solicitor who'd become an unexpected friend. The conversation ranged from budget concerns to upcoming exhibitions to Arabella's latest fundraising triumph. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, Lord Hartwell arrived unannounced. The older man, who'd once declared Sebastian a fool, stood in the doorway looking uncomfortable. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, "but I wanted to speak with you." Sebastian invited him in, curious despite himself. In the library, away from the others, Lord Hartwell pulled out an envelope. "This is a check for £5 million, he said. "For the foundation." Sebastian stared. "Why?" "Because I was wrong. About everything. About what duty means. About what legacy should be." He met Sebastian's eyes. "I spent my life protecting institutions that served no one, and I watched you build something that actually matters. I want to be part of that before I die. You don't have to do this." "I know, but I want to." Lord Hartwell's voice cracked slightly. "My granddaughter is a musician. Did you know that? She wanted to study at the conservatory, but the fees were too high. I told her to pursue something practical instead. She listened to me, and now she works in banking and hates every moment of it. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Just use this money to help other granddaughters whose families tell them to be practical. Help them be brave in ways mine couldn't." Sebastian accepted the check with shaking hands. "Thank you." "No, thank you for showing my generation that we got it all wrong." After Lord Hartwell left, Sebastian returned to the dinner and found Amelia watching him with knowing eyes. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Better than okay." He told her about the donation later, when they were alone in their quarters. She listened quietly, then smiled. "You know what this means, don't you?" "What?" "You're winning. Not the way you expected. Not by maintaining power or crushing opposition, but by actually changing hearts." Sebastian thought about that, about how transformation was never the dramatic thing movies promised. It was slow and difficult and required patience he'd never been taught to cultivate. But it was real. And real was what mattered. 10 years after the foundation launched, Sebastian stood in the Ravenshire Gardens at sunset, watching his daughter chase butterflies through flowers that had been planted by artist residents. She was 4 years old with Amelia's eyes and Sebastian's stubborn determination, and she had no idea that her father had once been the kind of person who measured worth in titles and lineage. She just knew him as the dad who helped with her art projects and attended every one of her mother's concerts and sometimes said silly things that made her laugh. Amelia appeared beside him, watching their daughter with the same mixture of joy and terror that parenthood seemed to require. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. How grateful I am that I was miserable enough to change. That's a strange thing to be grateful for. Maybe. But if I'd been content in that old life, I never would have stopped to listen to you sing. I'd have married Victoria and spent 50 years being quietly empty. Do you ever miss it? The certainty of knowing exactly who you were supposed to be? Sebastian considered the question honestly. Sometimes, when things are hard or uncertain, there's a comfort in having your life mapped out, even if the map leads nowhere good. But I'd rather be uncertain and alive than certain and dead inside. Their daughter ran up, breathless and triumphant, holding a flower she'd picked. "For you, Daddy." Sebastian took it with exaggerated ceremony. "Thank you, little one. It's beautiful, just like Mummy." Amelia laughed. Smart kid. They walked back toward the house together, this family that shouldn't exist according to every rule Sebastian had been raised to follow. And he felt the particular peace that comes from knowing you made the right choice, even when it was the hardest one. Inside, the foundation staff were preparing for tomorrow's grant ceremony. 50 new artists would receive support, each one a small revolution against the idea that creativity was a luxury only the wealthy could afford. Sebastian's role these days was mostly symbolic. Amelia ran the music programs. Arabella handled development. A professional staff managed day-to-day operations. He attended meetings and ceremonies, lent his name when it helped, and tried to stay out of the way of people who actually knew what they were doing. It was humbling. It was perfect. That night, after their daughter was asleep and the house was quiet, Sebastian and Amelia sat on their balcony watching stars emerge over grounds that had once represented everything wrong with inherited privilege and now housed something approaching hope. "Do you think we've done enough?" Sebastian asked, "to justify the destruction?" Amelia leaned against him. "I think we've done what we could with what we had. Whether that's enough isn't for us to decide." Profound and unsatisfying. Welcome to adulthood. They sat in comfortable silence while the night deepened around them. Sebastian thought about the man he'd been. The Duke who'd stood in the blue drawing room contemplating a life sentence to loveless duty. That man felt like a stranger now, someone he'd known briefly in passing but never truly understood. He'd killed that man. Not violently, not dramatically, just slowly, choice by choice, until nothing of him remained except the lessons learned from his mistakes. And in his place was someone Sebastian actually recognized. Someone flawed and uncertain but trying. Someone who understood that power without purpose was just elaborate slavery. That legacy meant nothing if it served only itself. Someone who knew that being happy required the terrifying courage to actually want it. Amelia's hand found his in the darkness. "I'm glad you stopped," she said quietly. "Stopped what?" "That night, in Regent Street. I'm glad you stopped to listen." Sebastian kissed her temple. "Me too." In the gardens below, security lights clicked on, illuminating paths where tomorrow children would run and artists would gather and life would continue in all its messy, beautiful complexity. And Sebastian Ravenshire, who'd once been a duke and was now just a man, felt something he'd spent most of his life not believing in. He felt whole. Not because he'd found all the answers, not because the struggle was over, but because he'd finally learned to ask the right questions. What makes a life worth living? Not the power you hold or the legacy you inherit, but the courage to choose who you become, and the grace to keep choosing every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The city lights of London glowed on the horizon, and somewhere in those streets, someone else was standing at a crossroads, wondering if they had the strength to burn their world down for a chance at something real. Sebastian hoped they did. He hoped they found their own version of Amelia, their own reason to stop running and start fighting. He hoped they learned what he'd learned, that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is admit you've been wrong about everything, and then choose to do better. One impossible decision at a time, until impossible becomes possible, and possible becomes real, and real becomes the only thing that matters. The night deepened around them, stars blazing in the endless dark, and Sebastian held his wife's hand and knew that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Not as duke and subject, not as savior and saved, just as two people who'd chosen each other despite every reasonable objection, who'd built something meaningful from the wreckage of who they used to be, and who understood finally that happiness wasn't something you found or won or inherited. It was something you created, one honest moment at a time, for the rest of your life.